Namaste. My name is Sharda Narayanan. I have been interested in Indian knowledge systems since a long time and have learned a lot about the current state of Indological studies from Sri Rajiv Malhotra ji. While we were discussing this project on the 10 heads of Ravana, I chose to review the writing of Dr. Kancha Ilaiah, who is well known for his Hindu-phobic views as well as advocacy of Christian proselytization. It's been a very depressing experience to read his shallow writing on Hindu thought, which is mainly intended to bolster his ill-conceived hatred and call for violence. His writing is a free run on abusing Hindus. Nowhere while making his baseless allegations is he able to quote Hindu scripture, nor even refer to any real incident while claiming human rights violations. Every economic and social problem, and even crises in international trade and commerce, he blames on what he calls the Brahminical way of thought, which he is not even able to define. It is appalling how this has not yet launched criminal inquiry or legal proceedings. It's shocking that liberal-minded people should consider his writing a serious academic work. It has taken Sri Rajiv Malhotra ji to address this huge injustice on the Hindu community and to critique his work to show how much is wrong with it. Our chapter in this book is basically based on two books in particular. That is Why I Am Not a Hindu, brought out in 2002, and Post-Hindu India in 2009. He claims in the preface that he intends to empower the Dalit Bahujan forces of India in all spheres of activity. This would have been a laudable endeavor had it been done on a more constructive basis. What the books in fact achieve, with little emphasis on facts, is to make their point with shock value and to demonize Brahmins, who are often considered stumbling blocks to the agenda of religious conversion. Although the word Hindu is used, it is only the Brahmin community against whom Dr. Ilaiah aims his ire. There are 3 points of constructive criticism in social sciences that do come through in these books. 1, gluttony, rapacity, and human greed connected with consumerism. 2, gender issues and housework. 3, local indigenous knowledge systems neglected in the march towards globalization. Now, none of the above issues are inherently related to Hinduism, but are common problems that are faced by every community at every economic level in India and most other countries. But he lays the blame for every problem at the Brahmin's door. The word Hinduism is used in an arbitrary manner, not connected with philosophy of epistemology, and it is very difficult to view his writing as having any academic rigor. Most people with even a passing familiarity with the ancient cultural history and deep symbolism of Hinduism would exercise caution in their comments for fear of exposing their own ignorance. Not so Dr. Ilaiah, who blithely plunges to any depth, no matter how low. There are many personal and unsubstantiated attacks on the Brahmin people in their private lives also. From one, Why I'm Not a Hindu, he says, if a Brahmin has some extra rice, it will not be given away. From the other book, furthermore, Brahmanism looked upon every dead body as a potential ghost, and it was believed that with the burning of the body, the ghost also gets destroyed. The mother of all parasitic cultures is the culture of Brahmanism. What the book is full of is very strong statements, prejudiced, biased statements like this, none of them backed by any kind of evidence or quotations. And they seem to be addressed to an audience not familiar with the Hindu culture or the notions and concepts of Hinduism, or to portray to the international community how regressive and exploitive this whole school of thought is. That seems to be the aim. On the Hindu gods, there are so many errors in what he says. It is quite evident that he is not familiar with the Puranic lore and is not really familiar with the persona or the incidents related to these gods. This god, Brahma of wisdom, is armed with weapons to attack his enemies, the Dalit Bahujans. The source of education, Saraswati, is herself an illiterate woman. On Mahavishnu, he says he is monogamous and married to Lakshmi. If she, Lakshmi, came to know that a Dalit Bahujan man or woman has acquired wealth or is revolting against the caste system, she is required to bring that to the notice of Vishnu, who will go and exterminate such persons. Again, there is no information on where he received this kind of information from. There is a very serious misrepresentation of the teaching of a Bhagavad Gita that says Karmanyeva adhikaraste ma paleshu kadachana. Dr. Ilaiah presents this notion as to mean that the peasants should toil while the fruits should go to the priests. He actually says this in a different place. Here, he says he would have not understood the meaning of the stanza if a foreigner had not translated the Gita into English. This highlights the problem of relying on foreigners' translations while being oblivious to better sources. And this is a very big problem today that we have globally. There is a lot of distortion of history to suit agenda. And there are many issues. There are very serious gender issues and issues of exploitation and human rights violations. I think in this short presentation in these few minutes, I have been able to show a little bit of the kind of writing that we are dealing with. Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Subhodeep Mukhopadhyay, and I will continue the discussion started by my co-author Sharda. So first, we will explore some of Dr. Ilaiah's research principles and methodologies, and then we'll touch upon some of his academic positions. So this is what he has to say in one of his writings, that he sees critical writing as something very important, and that social sciences means nothing without critical writing. So research in general entails the process of finding answers to specific questions. And especially in the case of social sciences, this is more important since it deals with the domain of humans. So the four characteristics of critical writing, I mean, we should ideally have large sample sizes. The analysis should be unbiased and factual to the largest possible extent, and a person should be open-minded. However, he clearly says in his books, as even Sharda had pointed out, that his work is semi-autobiographical in nature, and he has received inputs from few of his friends and colleagues. From that, he forms the basis of many of his theories on the caste dynamics in India. In other words, the sample size is quite small. On the other hand, he makes use of this small sample size to make large generalizations on the entire Hindu community. So as it is clear from these quotes taken from his different books and essays, that he has a deep disdain for Hinduism, and he is very open about that. He openly admits that. And see, for us, from the point of view of scholarship, it really does not matter whether somebody has certain religious beliefs or not. However, when that belief starts impacting the nature of scholarship, that becomes a problem of concern. And that is actually the focus of some of the next few slides. So if you see, he characterizes Hinduism as some sort of a cult which worships violent figures. It's a club of the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, and Baniyas. That is the way he characterizes Hinduism, a very pejorative way of characterization. But on the other hand, he contrasts Hinduism with monotheistic religions, and religions which were constructed, that is the term used, constructed by prophets ostensibly for the betterment of humankind. So he's very clear on that front. And he encourages the Dalit community to move out of the Hindu fold and embrace Christianity. So he writes that on many occasions. And he's very happy to quote that this is happening in a big way. The conversion of to Christianity is happening in a big way. He's extremely happy about that. And he also feels that it is necessary that the church, the Western church, not the Indian church, the Western church provides English medium education to entire Dalit community, and each church should sponsor one school. So he has a detailed roadmap of how he feels the future should look like. And he also feels that Christianity alone is with a true English-knowing universal God. That is the solution that he believes in. And the primitive practices, so-called, which associates with Hinduism, those must be rejected. So here is a poem where he also expounds his thesis. I've just cited the sources in all the slides in case you would like to look it up. So next, I will talk about some of his claims, some of which are very difficult to verify, as Sharda had pointed out, and maybe also incorrect. Like for example, this one, he associates Harappa with, he says it has nothing to do with Vedic or or the Aryan civilization, so-called, but it is linked to the South Indian culture. So how does he arrive at that? So he says Harappa, and he takes the last word, Appa. And in southern India, Appa and Ayya come together as a pair. So Ayya he links to Jeremiah. So it becomes Jeremiah. And from that, he links this to Old Testament. So this is the kind of reasoning he's put in this case. So based on these name endings, he arrives at a conclusion that the Harappan civilization is linked to the Old Testament. So this is one example. There are more examples, like he accuses Indra of being the original leader who exterminated the entire Indus civilization. So it must be noted that this is actually a very old theory. Those who have read the work of Sir Mortimer Wheeler, he had very famously said, Indra stands accused. He had actually used that. So he builds upon that theory, and he comes up with his conclusions. Again, he accuses all manners of evils to Hinduism without any evidence. So murder, rape, every kind of charge he puts on Hindus. And this is actually one of the most surprising things that he says, that India is backward scientifically, or has been backward scientifically, because of the caste system. This is exactly the opposite of all that is known about India's advancement in science and technology, whether in the field of astronomy, mathematics, medicine, surgery, Ayurveda, music, metallurgy, architecture. In fact, Infinity Foundation has published 14 volumes on the history of Indian science and technology, covering areas like animal husbandry, water management, iron, zinc, and other areas. So probably we need to present a copy of these volumes to him so that he can just update himself on these areas. Then again, he writes that this is one more example of assertions which are not backed by any facts. So he characterizes Hanuman as a South Indian, South Indian Dalit, I think. That is the term that he uses. So the point is, see, it doesn't matter, because even if he's a South Indian Dalit or not, nobody seems to mind that, because entire northern India is dotted with Hanuman temples. So even if he were, it is irrelevant to the cause of spirituality. Oh, in fact, just another point, that even today, Hanuman is a resident deity of the most of India's indigenous gyms or akhadas. So he's a resident deity of that. So it is an irrelevant point and unverifiable claim. I mean, we don't know where he gets these ideas from. So what is the implication of all this? To what extent is his research impartial and honest? So given his personal animosity, it is very unlikely that his research is unbiased. I mean, it's evident that there's a lot of bias in this. And what is more worrying is that his book, Why I'm Not a Hindu, is a very highly cited work. Like as many as 400 citations I found on Google Scholar. And in fact, it has been cited in the definitive work, Colonialism, Post-Colonialism, which has been recommended as exactly the sort of book teachers want the students to read. So if this is what students start reading at the very beginning, they will have a very negative impression of India and Hinduism as a whole. The other implication is that generally the way we characterize Hinduism as a system which promotes yoga, well-being, mental well-being, sustainable living, holistic healthcare. So this he finds problematic. It's a culture which promotes mutual respect, but this is not acceptable to him. On the other hand, faiths which preach at best tolerance, that he finds very acceptable. And the key takeaway from this is that Hinduism is evil and Christianity is good. This is the key takeaway message, and that Hinduism is a problem which can be solved through Christianity. Again, I like to add that I'm not against Christianity. This is what he's saying in his through his work. So now I'll quickly go to the next of the slides. So we need to ask, is Christianity indeed a solution in this context? Given the problems that he has mentioned, is it indeed a solution? Some of these questions are based on Rajivji's work. So he had asked the same question in Breaking India. So is the church really qualified to cure Indian society, assuming that it has some evil? What is their past track record in solving social evils in third world country in that context? Do they have superior human rights records? So one way of looking at this is let us look at the condition of, say, many people who adopted Christianity in India. So that is a good way of looking at that. Assuming that they converted to escape the shackles of evil Hinduism, so assuming that is the framework, so today they must be living in life of dignity at par with rest of the Indians. That is the hypothesis I'm going with. But however, the reality is quite different. So I'll just... okay, so the other part of the question is, this is the point of view from India. The other is the global track record. So has Christianity actually worked as a solution to this problem of social evils in other parts of the world? That is also some issues, like, say, problems in Latin America and African Americans in the US. So has it solved their problems? Maybe not. So we would also like to build upon this thesis. So he maintains a studied silence on many of Christianity's own problems. Again, this is, I'll just like to reiterate, I'm not against Christianity or anything, but I'm just comparing similar problems in both religions. And the solution he's promoting this as a solution to that as a problem. So there are a lot of examples we have seen on videos of miracle healings in churches. So he's very silent on that. Or there are biblical stories which he accepts as reality. I mean, there are no questions asked about that, whereas he questions Hindu deities on different fronts. And there have been numerous abuse cases around the world which have come on media over the last many years. Whether it's Protestant or Catholic, it's been there on media. So the point is, social issues like discrimination, greed, exploitation, issues which he attributes to the Hindu community, they are universal in nature, and India is no exception to that. India has many issues, and we cannot deny that we have had many social issues. And the point is that whatever issues we had, it was our gurus, social leaders within the Indian community, the Hindu community, who have recognized it and tried their best to solve it, one evil at a time. That has been the approach in India. And as a system, Hinduism has undergone numerous changes over the last hundreds of years. Reform after reforms have kept on happening. And all this happened without the intervention of any foreign power or somebody dispensing human rights. Even without that, the changes have kept on happening. But what the kind of activism which Sri Ilaiah is promoting, that is very toxic in nature. And it ends up fragmenting the country. That is the biggest the biggest worry that I have, that in the guise of upliftment, he is promoting a very divisive agenda. That is why the title of the essay is Bharat Vikhandar. So it's a play on the term Vikhandan, which is the Hindi translation for Rajivji's book Breaking India. So he's the guy bringing about the Vikhandan of India and facilitating that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shraddha and Subhodeep. Now I kindly request Professor Madhu Kishwar, founder and managing trustee of Manushi, to add her comments.
राजीव जी, वैसे तो मुझे आपको थैंक यू करना चाहिए कि आप अपने बुक लॉन्चेस में मुझे शामिल कर रहे हैं और अपने इस सारे एफर्ट का एक हिस्सा बना रहे हैं. परंतु ये किताब जो मुझे पढ़ाई, और विशेष कांचा इलैया का चैप्टर, आई टेल यू, खून खोलता है. Any time I hear him speak, even on TV channels, my skin breaks into a rash. It is absolutely one of the most painful experiences to read him, and then, of course, to take him seriously enough to come and critique him before an audience. While most of what you've said and written about Kancha Ilaiah, I agree with. But I have a slight problem with the manner in which you have dealt with Kancha Ilaiah so respectfully, so reverentially. मुझे हैरत होती है कि ये कोई एकेडमिक किताब तो है नहीं, ये हेट ट्रैक्ट है, plain and simple hate tract. There's no other word for it, and one of the most lowly level of hate tracts. And look at how you introduce him so reverentially. Please change it in the next edition. Kancha Ilaiah Shepherd is a noted Indian writer, academician, and a self-described Shudra intellectual. The author of influential books like, वो तो माना influential हैं किताबें, Why I'm Not a Hindu, Post-Hindu India, etc. He is considered an important Indian social thinker and is referred to as the Good Shepherd. And then he was professor, ये तो चलो वो था, head of department भी था, Center for Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy at Maulana Azad National University. These are facts you can't escape. But they point to the tragedy of Indian education. ऐसा व्यक्ति जिसको मैं चपड़ासी की नौकरी ना दूँ और वो डायरेक्टर बन जाते हैं, प्रोफेसर हैं और दुनिया भर में भाषण देते रहते हैं. Currently, he provides leadership and guidance to an organization called Telangana Mass and Social Organization, an alliance of Dalit, Marxist, Communist, social justice and activism groups. Social justice शब्द इस आदमी के साथ जोड़ना. In academic circles, he is regarded as a preeminent social scientist, following a long and illustrious line of dissenters and critics of the Hindu social order, and a key player in the fight against violent Hindutva assertion. Now, I know that you don't really have this in your heart. I know that your blood must have boiled, and you must have choked writing these sentences for him, because later on, you explain what he really is. But I'm saying anybody who reads these adjectives will say, serious banda to hai. जो राजीव जी के द्वारा एडिटेड किताब में उसको एमिनेंट एकेडमिक ये वो कहा गया है. Now, I'm sure Rajiv knows it better than me, and he's dealt with this lowly creature even in his book, Breaking India, first volume that he wrote many years ago. He's actually a shameless sepoy, a paid hireling of the conversion mafia in India. That's it. There's no better description I can find for him. These may sound like harsh words, but his books and articles deserve much harsher treatment. If he had a government worth its name and a credible judiciary, he would have been locked up in jail for the rest of his life. And the mildest treatment would have been to lock him up in a psychiatric ward forever. But honestly, that he's roaming free and being treated as an academic whose work we have to discuss is, I think, one of the greatest tragedies of India today, and it speaks poorly of all of us. For me, it was really a torture to read him again. Let us also be clear, he calls himself a Shudra intellectual, and he claims to write on behalf of certain jatis, but his hate tracts, whether in the form of books or articles, are nothing more than venomous outpourings of a Christian missionary speaking on behalf of the most malicious sects of Christianity emanating from America. Even within Christianity, there are groups like the Catholic Church, थोड़ा Jesuits, थोड़ा तहजीब से बोलते हैं. इस आदमी को तहजीब भी नहीं है बात करने की, तो इसलिए मुझे नहीं लगता कि मुझे उसके लिए ज़रा भी संकोच करना चाहिए हार्श शब्द इस्तेमाल करने के लिए. He's also very mal educated, shameless. जो आपने कुछ quotes दिखाई, and a propagandist for the church who doesn't feel one bit embarrassed about lying brazenly about every single aspect of his own life and the society around him. Rarely have people lied about their own life in the manner in which he does, and I'll explain why. I have had long innings with him, and I know him from the days when he was recruited freshly by the church. This is around the Mandal Commission days, when a whole agitation broke out in India against reservations. And if any strong argument exists, in my view, to banish all reservations, it would be a man like him getting into academia. वो खुद मानता है कि अगर ओबीसी रिजर्वेशन नहीं होती तो उसको नौकरी नहीं मिलनी थी लेक्चरर की भी, और नहीं ही मिलनी चाहिए थी. As I said, he is a living specimen of why we ought not to have reservations. It is for me shocking that Rajiv Gandhi Foundation funded his study, and it is part of curriculum in many Indian universities as well as leading universities of Europe and America. This despite the fact that there's not a single footnote or citation in his magnum opus or other hate tracts that have catapulted him to fame and launched a very, very lucrative global career for him. He indulges in such malicious defamation of Hindu society, culture, and millennia-old civilization without the slightest regard for facts. और ये एकेडमिक किताब राजीव गांधी फाउंडेशन को भी कायदे से हमको सू करना चाहिए. क्या ये एकेडमिया आप प्रमोट करते हैं? आपने पढ़ी भी थी इसको देने से पहले कि बस उसका ओबीसी सर्टिफिकेट देख के और चर्च की बैकिंग देख के आपने उसको ये दे दी. और दूसरा, कभी भी एक शब्द इसके मुंह से इस्लाम के खिलाफ नहीं निकलता और खुलेआम कहता है कि इस्लाम और क्रिश्चियनिटी दो रिलीजन है. हिंदू ना धर्म है ना कुछ है. इट्स अ जेनोसाइडल कल्ट. फासिस्ट तो इज द माइल्डेस्ट वर्ड ही यूजेस फॉर अस. एंड it's clear that the church is using him to, they're very good at it, both Islamists and Christians, first cousins हैं. They're very good at transferring guilt. तो जो genocides उन्होंने की, जो अत्याचार दुनिया में किए, जो सहार किए, जो डिस्ट्रक्शन की, जहाँ पांव पड़े इन दोनों के वहाँ डिस्ट्रक्शन ही हुआ, वो सारा का सारा गिल्ट हम पे ट्रांसफर करते हैं विदाउट एनी एविडेंस. ऑन द कॉन्ट्ररी, आवर एविडेंस, आवर हिस्ट्री एंड अ ट्रैक रिकॉर्ड is nothing to be ashamed of. If anything, we have every reason to be proud of. And therefore, I would suggest to you, my friend, I know in your heart you and I are on the same page. But when dealing with him, don't try to argue like he's a reasonable man. हम उसको अपनी किताबें दे देंगे साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी वाली तो वो शायद समझ जाए. नहीं समझने वाला. पत्थर ही नहीं है, जहर भरी हुई है. इंजेक्शन इतने उसके लीथल लग चुके हैं. और ये भी कहना कि हाँ हमारे समाज में भी प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, हम उसको ठीक करते रहते हैं और करते रहेंगे. हमें इनको सर्टिफिकेट ना देना है और ना प्रूव करना है कि कोई थोड़ी सी भी इक्विवेलेंस है. हमारी जो समस्याएं हैं हम झेल लेंगे, तुम अपनी ज़बान संभाल के रखो, नहीं तो उस ज़बान का कुछ इंतज़ाम करना ही पड़ेगा. The amazing thing is that American universities, European universities, Indian universities, intellectuals इतने उसको बढ़िया certification देते हैं, but his slanderous writing has no basis in reality and cannot be supported by even a shred of evidence, either historical, textual, or sociological. Not a single allegation or defamatory statement that he makes against Hindus is backed by any evidence, contemporary or historical. In fact, every defamatory statement he makes can be challenged by a plethora of solid, inconvertible evidence that he's lying and demonizing those whose track record is one of enormous suffering. We are a wounded civilization, very badly wounded civilization. Or Kancha Ilaiah जैसे आके, and these are not my words, as you know whose words they are, somebody much taller than me, Naipaul used this phrase for India. और ये आके नमक मिर्ची और क्या क्या उसमें हमारे वुंड्स में, जख्मों में और भी ऐसी मिर्ची डालते हैं, नमक डालते हैं कि हम तिल मिलाएं भी क्या समझ नहीं आती. और मेरा तो ये पक्का विश्वास है कि इस इंसान, ऐसे इंसानों से, और ये अकेला नहीं है, ये पहला बड़ा कैच था, by the way, and I witnessed that whole story and I'm going to share some of it with you. if I have the time. Rajiv, do I have the time or do you want me? Yeah. He was one of the first big prime catchers of the missionary mafia, and how they used him, I'll bring in. आपने कुछ तो उदाहरण दे दिए कैसे हेट सोक्लाइज हनुमान वाज अ साउथ इंडियन दलित, और राम ने उसका इस्तेमाल किया और उसको लोली स्टेटस दिया, उसका कभी भी हनुमान का स्टेटस ऊंचा नहीं हुआ। अरे राम मंदिर के बराबर या उससे भी शायद ज़्यादा हनुमान मंदिर है इस देश में, और ज्ञान गुण सागर है, और क्या क्या नहीं, जो हनुमान चालीसा ही पढ़ो और तो क्या, या इवन द ओरिजिनल वाल्मीकि रामायण, इट्स सो लविंगली डेल्ट विद दैट कैरेक्टर। और दलित जैसे शब्द कि वो दलित था, साउथ इंडियन था, ये शब्द हमारे वोकैबुलरी में है ही नहीं। दलित शब्द भी ये क्रिश्चियन मिशनरी मिस्चिफ है, और जिन्होंने इन अच्छे भले लोगों को दलित बनाया, बैकवर्ड कास्ट, ओबीसी, एमबीसी, ईबीसी, ऑल काइंड्स ऑफ बैकवर्ड्स, उनसे ये इश्क कर बैठे। और हमने जब कभी भी किसी को ऐसे अपशब्द कहे ही नहीं, और वेदांत में तो हर प्राणी, सिर्फ इंसान नहीं, जहाँ चींटी से लेकर हाथी और छोटे से छोटे क्रीचर, इनएनिमेट ऑब्जेक्ट्स भी, हम तो पत्थरों तक की पूजा करते हैं। तो ऐसे कल्चर पे इस तरह की तोहमतें लगाना। दूसरा एक अनोखा, हिंदूज काऊ को वर्शिप करते हैं क्योंकि इनको गोरा रंग पसंद है, और हम दलित बहुजन बफलो को, वो काला है, हम जैसा काला है। बताइए, काऊ तो कितने रंगों में आती है, चितकबरी भी होती है, काली भी होती है, भूरी भी होती है, लाल भी होती है, बट नेवर माइंड। पर जैसे ही आप, इसी में आपने कहा है कि धर्मराज तो बफलो की सवारी करके आते हैं, और इसके लिए धर्मराज को आना ही चाहिए। काश मैं समन कर सकती हूँ। फिर रावण इज अ साउथ इंडियन नेशनलिस्ट। ये नहीं कि उसने माँ सीता का अपहरण किया इसलिए उससे युद्ध करना पड़ा, और शराफत से वो नहीं छोड़ रहा था माँ सीता को। उसके पास हम हनुमान एम्बेसडर बन के गए राम के, पर ये कि वो साउथ इंडियन नेशनलिस्ट। अरे आप बताइए, मतलब किस आधार पे, कौन इसको फीड करता है? वही जो पावर्स जो पैगंबर जी के कान में कुछ कुछ आगे बोलती थी, या जीसस क्राइस्ट का जो उनको मिलती थी ऊपर से हिदायतें, ऐसा ही कोई होगा, या पता नहीं कौन सी दुष्ट आत्मा है। सरस्वती के बारे में कहते हैं वाइट रोब्ड घोस्ट, हाँ, सफ़ेद कपड़ों में पहने वाली भूतनी। फिर कहते हैं वो इलिटरेट है और वो शिक्षा की देवी, वो किसको क्या पढ़ाएगी। ये सब लिखा हुआ है इन्होंने। मैं तो हिंदी में बोल रही हूँ क्योंकि जब मुझे गुस्सा आता है तो फिर हिंदी में ही आसानी से बात हो सकती है। नोट्स तो मेरे अंग्रेज़ी में हैं। फिर कहते हैं नो साइंस इन इंडिया, कभी हुई नहीं। अब तो नासा भी बेचारे हमारे वेदों को पढ़ रहे हैं, हमारे शास्त्रों को पढ़ रहे हैं टू अंडरस्टैंड द ओरिजिन ऑफ द यूनिवर्स। ये वो सब कटिंग एज साइंस इज डिपेंडिंग ऑन आवर एंशिएंट टेक्स्ट। और इसको आप कहेंगे 12 वॉल्यूम देंगे। फिर आपने हरप्पा का तो बोल ही दिया, जब मुझे भी लगा कि गोलगप्पा क्यों नहीं, अयप्पा, ये वो साउथ इंडियन। फिर ये बोलते हैं बहुजन और स्त्रियों को कभी पढ़ने की इजाज़त नहीं दी थी। आपने अपनी किताब में धर्मपाल जी को कोट किया है, द ब्यूटीफुल ट्री। जिसने भी आप में से धर्मपाल जी की किताब नहीं पढ़ी, द ब्यूटीफुल ट्री, द स्टेट ऑफ एजुकेशन, माइंड यू एट द टर्न ऑफ ब्रिटिश रूल इन इंडिया, ये इतने करीब 1000 साल, 800 साल इस्लामिक आक्रांताओं के बाद भी क्या स्टेट ऑफ एजुकेशन थी। वो फार अहेड ऑफ इंग्लैंड, फार अहेड ऑफ यूरोप, फार अहेड ऑफ एनी अदर कंट्री इन द वर्ल्ड। और हमारे स्कूल्स में मेजॉरिटी, या गुरुकुलों में मेजॉरिटी सो कॉल्ड, जिनको ये दलित कहते हैं, बहुजन कहते हैं, हमने कभी ओबीसी किसी को नहीं कहा। हमने हर जाति का उतना ही सम्मान किया है जितना स्वयं की जाति का। ऐसा कभी नहीं हुआ। एंड मोस्ट हर जाति हॉरिजॉन्टली प्लेस्ड होती थी। ये वर्टिकल प्लेसमेंट तो क्रिश्चियनिटी से आती है। और ये, हाँ, ये महानुभाव मेरे अभी याद आया, जो क्रिश्चियन थियोलॉजी की है, चेन ऑफ बीइंग थियोरी, आई एम श्योर मेनी ऑफ यू नो ऑफ इट, विच इज़ गॉड इन हेवन, देन उसका अपॉइंटेड किंग ऑन अर्थ, देन ही अपॉइंट्स वेरियस फ्यूडल लॉर्ड्स एट्सेट्रा, जाते जाते फिर वो स्लेव्स आ जाते हैं. सो देयर इज अ proper chain of being. That is vertical organization of society and the social order, cosmic order. हमारे यहाँ ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं है. ईश्वर आपके अंदर नहीं विराजमान तो आपको कहीं नहीं मिलेगा. वो कोई ऊपर दाढ़ी वाला नहीं बैठा हुआ ईश्वर बन के या अल्लाह बन के या गॉड बन के. और ये साहब कहते हैं कि हिंदू सोसाइटी डेमोक्रेटिक नहीं है और क्रिश्चियनिटी ही केवल और इस्लाम ही केवल डेमोक्रेसी लाते हैं, क्योंकि उनका जो गॉड है बड़ा डेमोक्रेटिक है. और वो जो गॉड है बड़ा डेमोक्रेटिक है. उसने दुनिया कैसी, सृष्टि कैसी बनाई है, मैन को सबसे सुपीरियर बनाया है, बाकी सब उसकी इंजॉयमेंट के लिए है. तो इसलिए इनके हिसाब से मीट खाना, बीफ खाना नेशनल ड्यूटी होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि इनके गॉड ने सब एनिमल्स को मैनकाइंड के प्लेजर के लिए बनाया है, उसका भोग करने के लिए बनाया है. ये कितनी डेमोक्रेटिक थियरी है. और हम जो चींटी को भी अन्न डालते हैं, कॉकरोच को भी मारने से डरते हैं कि जीव हत्या क्यों करें, हम तो बड़े पापी हो गए, फासिस्ट हो गए. तो इस तरह का, और गीता के कर्मयोग का जो इसने अनोखा भद्दा चित्रण किया है. और गीता का कर्मयोग किसी शीप ब्रीडर के लिए या किसी तथाकथित जिनको ये दलित कहते हैं उसके लिए नहीं था. वो अर्जुन को बता रहे हैं. अर्जुन कौन था? कोई दलित नहीं था. और कर्मयोग का सिद्धांत श्री कृष्ण अर्जुन को बताने के माध्यम से हम तक पहुंचा रहे हैं. तो वो उसको पसंद नहीं आया और कहता है कि उसका मतलब ये है कि जो दलित है, बहुजन है, वो काम करें, ये जो बाकी हैं मोटे, ग्लटनस, हिंदू अपकास्ट, स्पेशली ब्राह्मण्स, ये खाएं. और इतने भद्दे चित्रण हैं ब्राह्मण पुरुषों के ही नहीं, ब्राह्मण स्त्रियों के इतने भद्दे चित्रण हैं that I'm surprised nobody has bothered to take him to court. I think I should, if nobody else does. कुछ तो करना पड़ेगा इसका इलाज. दूसरा, क्योंकि मैं इसको थोड़ा बहुत जानती रही हूँ बहुत साल से, as I said, from the time of Mandal agitation or even before, he lies even about his personal life. जैसे अगर आप ये पढ़ते हैं उसकी Why I'm Not a Hindu, तो बहुत रोमांटिक उसका डिस्क्रिप्शन है उसकी कम्युनिटी का, शीप ब्रीडर्स का. कितनी उनमें कलाएं हैं, कितना कुछ आता है, क्या क्या स्किल्स जाती हैं शीप ब्रीडिंग में, वूल शेयरिंग में. ऑफ कोर्स दैट्स ट्रू एंड आई रोट अबाउट ऑल दिस वे बैक एट द टाइम ऑफ मंडल एजिटेशन. और हमारी भी यही शिकायत है अपनी शिक्षा पद्धति से कि ये स्किल्स की कोई मान्यता नहीं रखी हमारी एजुकेशन सिस्टम ने. पर यह सोचता है ब्राह्मणों ने नहीं की. असली उसको डाउनग्रेड करने का काम तो मकौले पुत्रों ने किया, जो नई शिक्षा नीति 1947 के बाद लाई गई. परंतु वो जो सारा, राजीव, आई एम श्योर यू नो इट बेटर देन मी, that entire description is that of a happy community going about its business and using their skills in very productive ways. और एक और बात जो साफ दिखती है कि कभी किसी ब्राह्मण ने आके, किसी और ने आके उनको नहीं रोका कि ये तुम क्यों कर रहे हो, ये तो तुम गंदा काम कर रहे हो. देयर इज नो डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ दैट. हिज चाइल्डहुड सीम्स हैप्पी इनफ. एंड इन एनी केस even by his definition, a sheep breeding community would come not in Dalit और OBC और MBC, वैश्य में आएंगे, क्योंकि शीप ब्रीडिंग बहुत ही रिम्यूनरेटिव ऑक्यूपेशन होता है. पता है आपको कितने की एक भेड़ बिकती है? किसी के पास 100-150 भेड़ें हैं. इट्स ह्यूज कैपिटल एंड इट रिक्वायर्स नो इन्वेस्टमेंट, बिकॉज शीप तो ऐसे ही ब्रीड करती हैं अपने आप ही. ऐसा तो कुछ नहीं करना पड़ता ना कि फैक्ट्री लगाई है उसमें रॉ मटेरियल लाओ. ये तो रॉ मटेरियल भी इनका अपना ब्रीडिंग करते हैं, फिर वूल भी बेचते हैं. वूल इज़ ऑल्सो हाई प्राइस्ड आइटम. हाउ कैन दिस कम्युनिटी हैव बीन पुअर एंड दलित in pre-British India? He overlooks the fact that the downgrading of these occupations, the de-skilling of our people happened during colonial rule. उन्होंने खेती को बदहाल किया, किसान जिनको हम उत्कृष्ट मानते थे, अन्नदाता, उनको बैकवर्ड कास्ट में ला खड़ा किया, सुनारों को, लोहारों को, शीप ब्रीडर्स को, जितनी हमारी प्रोडक्टिव क्लासेस हैं, भारत में किसी ने उनको बैकवर्ड नहीं कहा, पिछड़ा नहीं कहा, परंतु अंग्रेज़ों ने बैकवर्ड कास्ट, स्केड्यूल्ड कास्ट और क्या क्या बना के डिप्रेस्ड क्लास, डिप्रेस किसने किया? कॉलोनियल रूल ने। परंतु कॉलोनियल रूल की तो गुणगाथा गाता है, थकता नहीं है। तो नो एंगस्ट अगेंस्ट कॉलोनियल रूल, नो एंगस्ट अगेंस्ट दोज हु डेवस्टेटेड अस इकोनॉमिकली, डिस्ट्रॉयड आवर नॉलेज परंपरास, but angst against those who are victims. One of the worst victims of foreign invasions and foreign rule have been the Brahmins. और इस्लाम चाहे हो चाहे क्रिश्चियनिटी हो, इन सबको क्यों खुंदक थी ब्राह्मणों के साथ? क्योंकि नॉलेज परंपराओं को तबाह करना है तो नॉलेज विल्डर्स को, नॉलेज गार्नरर्स को, जिन जो परंपरा को संजोए रखे हैं, उसको आप डिस्ट्रॉय कर दो। वो कन्वर्ट नहीं होने को तैयार थे इतनी आसानी से, तो इसलिए इस्लामियों ने सरतन से जुदा किया और अंग्रेज़ों ने उनको बदनाम इतना किया कि फिर वो संस्कृत छोड़ के लग गए अंग्रेज़ी सीखने एंड बिकेम शशि थरूर्स। सो द पॉइंट, मकौले पुत्र का प्राइम एग्जाम्पल तो वही है ना, कितनी बढ़िया अंग्रेज़ी भी बोलता है। तो ये जो ज्ञान परंपराएं जिन्होंने तबाह की, उनके खिलाफ उसको कोई गुस्सा नहीं है, बल्कि उनकी चाटुकारिता ऐसी करता है कि वो उसको किक भी करें तो बोलेगा थैंक यू वेरी मच। बट हम जिन्होंने इन सब ज्ञान परंपराओं को, ये नहीं, अच्छा ये देखिए, इनके समाज की, चाहे शीप ब्रीडर हैं, चाहे कोई भी नट कम्युनिटी के जो जिनको अंग्रेज़ों ने क्रिमिनल ट्राइब्स, डी नोटिफाइड ट्राइब कर दिया, छोटे बड़े जो भी ऑक्यूपेशनल ग्रुप्स थे, जितने भी तथाकथित आदिवासी जिनको ये कहने लगे, हमने कभी उनको आदिवासी नहीं कहा, स्केड्यूल ट्राइब, ये वो, सबके कल्चर, भाषाएं बरकरार रही। ये किस लिए रही? क्योंकि हमारे समाज में कोई भी एक जाति का अपने आप को इतना बड़ा नहीं समझता कि दूसरों को कहे कि तुम अपनी भाषा बदलो, तुम अपना पहनावा बदलो, तुम अपने कपड़े बदलो, तुम खान पान बदलो, तुम पूजा पद्धति बदलो। इतनी डाइवर्सिटी अगर भारतवर्ष में हजारों साल तक रही, और ये जो कम्युनिटीज़ की बात करता है, ये आप रामायण महाभारत में भी इनके वर्णन पाएंगे। वो इसीलिए कि कभी किसी ने किसी और के ऊपर दादागिरी नहीं जमाई। ये नहीं कहा कि तुम हमारे अनुसार बनो, हमारी बात मानो और हमारी पद्धति अडॉप्ट करो, इसीलिए डाइवर्सिटी बनी रहे। और 1-1.5 जनरेशन भी नहीं लगती है, ईसाई तो कोई बनता है या इस्लाम कबूलता है, तो overnight you are expected to give up, you are supposed to start hating your parents, certainly have no relationship to your ancestral ज्ञान परंपरा, उसको त्यागो, उस पे गाली गलौज करो जैसे ये कांचा इलैया देता है, और अंग्रेज़ों का बंदर बन के जीने का तुरंत इंतज़ाम कर लो। You are expected to start hating everything that you were. They do it within no time, but he loves it. He loves the process of conversion and decimation of his own community's culture once the community converts to Christianity or Islam for that matter and adopts a foreign language, an altogether foreign language. एक अनोखी और बात कहता है कि हम जो तथाकथित दलित बहुजन जो भाषा बोलते थे, तेलुगु हमारे गांव में, मुझे कभी भी जो अपर कास्ट की भाषा समझ ही नहीं आती थी। इट मेड नो सेंस टू मी। अच्छा, अपने गांव में रहने वाले फेलो सिटीजन्स की इसको भाषा नहीं समझ आती थी, हालांकि वो तेलुगु बोलते थे। क्यों? क्योंकि थोड़ा बहुत उसमें फ़र्क होता है वोकैबुलरी में, हर जाति में, परंतु इसकी अंग्रेज़ी इसको फटाफट अच्छी भी लगने लगी, समझ भी आने लगी, और अंग्रेज़ी को लिबरेशन का रूट भी ये मानने लगा। उससे इसको कोई परहेज़ नहीं है। इसको ये नहीं पता मूठ बुद्धि को कि अगर हमारे देश में या हर प्रांत में हर भाषा, तेलुगु इज स्पोकन डिफरेंटली, द vocabulary and ways of worship may change. Your gods and goddesses may be different, but it never is that anybody will cast aspersions on your chosen deities. शिकायत करता है हमारी पोचम्मा को ये नहीं पूछते, और बहुत इसको शिकायत है कि लक्ष्मी, सरस्वती, दुर्गा पैन इंडियन है। तो आपने क्या पोचम्मा की पूजा बचाए रखी क्रिश्चियन होने के बावजूद? क्या ईसाई धर्म के लोग इजाज़त देते हैं पोचम्मा? हजारों साल तक पोचम्मा की पूजा की पद्धति, प्रथा चलती आई। किसी ब्राह्मण ने, किसी क्षत्रिय ने, वैश्य ने नहीं कहा कि पोचम्मा छोड़ो, आप हमारे अनुसार पूजा पद्धति करो। पर आज आप ईसाई बने हैं, कल से आप अपने मंदिर नहीं जा सकते, ये हाल है। और मैंने पब्लिश भी किया है एक केस स्टडी स्वराज्य मैगजीन में, कृपया देखिए, बिहार के नट गांव में। एंड राजीव, क्रिश्चियन मिशनरीज जो स्कूल चलाते हैं वहाँ बच्चे जो एडमिट करते हैं उनको साइन अप करना पड़ता है कि वो अपने मंदिर में नहीं जाएंगे, अपने किसी रिश्तेदार की शादी में नहीं जाएंगे क्योंकि वो हिंदू रीतियों से होगी या उस समाज की पारंपरिक रीतियों से होगी, किसी फंक्शन में शामिल नहीं होंगे। और जो बच्चे गलती से मान लो चले गए किसी अपने रिश्तेदार की शादी में या किसी फंक्शन में जहाँ पूजा हो रही है उनकी परंपरा तरीके से, पीटते हैं, उनकी हड्डियां तक तोड़ते हैं ये मिशनरीज। आई हैव इट ऑल ऑन टेप एंड दे थ्रो देम आउट ऑफ स्कूल। और स्कूल क्योंकि गांव में कोई अच्छा नहीं है तो लोग मिन्नतें करके कन्वर्जन नहीं कर पाए। एक महिला उस गांव में केवल नट कम्युनिटी की कन्वर्ट हुई, बट दे वर ऑल्सो अनहैप्पी एट द फैक्ट, एट द प्रेशर द मिशनरीज actually put on people to not just stop the practices of their ancestors, the languages of their ancestors, but also start hating them. तो ये पसंद है इसको, ये बड़ा डेमोक्रेटिक है, परंतु हिंदुओं ने क्योंकि सबको छोड़ रखा था खुला, ये पसंद नहीं है। अब इनको थोड़ा सा मैं बताऊं, 1980s में पहली बार मैं कांचा इलैया से मिली। मैं हैदराबाद यूनिवर्सिटी में लेक्चर के लिए गई थी, और उस समय हैदराबाद में यूनिवर्सिटी में भी, और शायद आज भी होगा, माओइस्ट इंटेलेक्चुअल्स का बहुत बोलबाला था। एंड दे वो एक्टिंग एज अ फ्रंट, जिनको विवेक अग्निहोत्री अर्बन नक्सल्स कहता है। तो PUDR, OPDR, इस तरह की डेमोक्रेटिक राइट, सिविल लिबर्टीज़ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, सब ये माओइस्ट चलाते थे, भी उसी का हिस्सा था। उस वक्त हमें समझ नहीं आया, बट द फैक्ट ऑफ द मैटर इज़ दैट ऑल माओइस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, all insurgency groups have been church-based, church-funded, church-backed, church-propped up. ये हमारी सरकार ने हमें कभी जानने नहीं दिया। ये बताया गया कि ये तो सोशल राइट्स की मूवमेंट है, गरीब लैंडलेस पुअर की है। सो आई मेट हिम देयर बिकॉज उस समय मानुषी के डेमोक्रेटिक राइट्स, विमेंस राइट्स क्रेडेंशियल्स बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग थे, और लेफ्टिस्ट में भी बहुत बोलबाला था। तो मानुषी बहुत हीरो थी, तो मुझे बहुत प्यार से इन सब लोगों ने होस्ट किया उस समय। एंड दिस इज़ रियली इम्पॉर्टेंट राजीव, दिस एंटी ब्राह्मणिज्म पार्ट, आई एम विटनेस टू इट। One of the most outstanding human rights activists was a man called Dr. Balagopal. He had a PhD in mathematics. First he taught in one of the universities, Andhra में, और उसके बाद उसने इतना ब्राइट, वन ऑफ द मोस्ट ब्रिलियंट, इफ़ यू रीड हिज आर्टिकल्स इन EPW, you may or may not agree with his defense of Maoists, but you cannot deny that he was brilliant and had the precision of a mathematical brain and a man of great integrity. And I knew him well, we were even friends, and I had a lot of respect for him. ये व्यक्ति जेल भी जाता है, और पूरा समय उसकी, अगर आप बायोग्राफी पढ़ें, पूरा समय लाइफ उसने पूरी डिवोट कर दी, बड़ी लेट शादी भी की। एंड देन ही इवन गेव अप हिज टीचिंग जॉब बिकॉज इट वाज कमिंग इन द वे, एंड टुक ऑन, he studied law, became a full-time practicing lawyer, not to earn money, he never did any commercial work, but civil liberties work. and he married a very charming, very nice journalist. तो मैं ये बताना चाह रही हूँ, क्विकली बताती हूँ. तो उसने, क्योंकि डॉक्टर बाला गोपाल wasn't a man of integrity, he started getting very uneasy with the violent and the very unethical ways of Maoists, notably the People's War Group with whom he was associated, and PUDR has always been a front organization. Believe you me, when that man who wrote some of the best pieces in defense of these Maoists as human rights activists, once he said their ways are very unethical, they all hounded him. And they hounded him because PUDR, etc., all these actually are, as are Maoists, backed by the church. And Kancha Ilaiah led that brigade, hounding a man like Balagopal, who was one of the founding figures of the PUDR. He had to leave, quit, and then he worked as a lone figure. But that didn't stop. When in 1890s, at the time of mid-90s, again I went, ये caste को लेके, as I said, Kancha Ilaiah was their first catch. And जो सियाटल में आज हो रहा है, उसकी ट्रायल रन तो हिंदुस्तान में SC/ST एक्ट के साथ हुई 1989 में, और आंध्रा से बहुत बड़ी मूवमेंट चली थी SC/ST एक्ट, बिकॉज देयर द चर्च एंड द माउस वर वेरी स्ट्रांग. और SC/ST एक्ट को लाने का मकसद ही ये था कि हिंदू कम्युनिटी के साथ रिश्ता टूट जाए SC/ST का, क्योंकि बहुत ड्रकोनियन है. इट्स लाइक द एंटी रेप लॉ. इफ यू merely accuse somebody of a caste slur, the person is sent to jail, no bail, and you have to prove your innocence, which you don't have to for murder. At that time, I heard stories from some of the better among the so-called upper caste activists that men like Kancha Ilaiah, those who use this Dalit Bahujan label for themselves, had started making the life of young women, mostly upper caste women, miserable, because they wanted sexual access and some also wanted them to marry. और अगर किसी महिला ने, young woman who refused marriage or who refused to be sexually available at their will, then they would get them booked under the not them, but their families. भाई को, पिता को, कि हमें caste slur किया. Lot of lives were ruined. Lot of Brahmin lives were ruined at that time, but nobody uttered a word. And I've been talking against this act ever since then, because I heard the first murmurs of its misuse coming from Andhra and coming from precisely groups like the ones that Kancha Ilaiah has been part of. So it's very clear that Kancha Ilaiah has been used as the advance guard. SC/ST Act, they got away with it. तो अभी जितना बड़ा मिसयूज हो रहा है, इनफैक्ट द सुप्रीम कोर्ट हैड टोल्ड द मोदी गवर्नमेंट, इसका इतना मिसयूज हो रहा है, दिस इज लीगल टेररिज्म, प्लीज फिक्स इट, प्लीज फिक्स इट. दे सेंट इट टू द गवर्नमेंट. Sadly enough, Modi government, instead of fixing that SC/ST Act, made it more draconian, because the government has to prove कि ये दलित बहुजन के साथ में हैं. So finally, I'll conclude with, there's a lot more about him that I have, but I will conclude by saying that he has, on behalf of the church, openly declared that he wants a Hindu-free India, which means Hindus should vanish, either convert. ये वही एजेंडा है जो इस्लाम का भी है. गजवा हिंद मिशन जो है वो यही कहती है कि आप कन्वर्ट हो या डेसिमेट कर देंगे आपको. दैट्स एग्जैक्टली व्हाट ही इज सेइंग ही वांट्स, एंड ही वांट्स अ सिविल वॉर. ही थिंक्स इट्स नेसेसरी, इट्स द मोस्ट प्रोग्रेसिव थिंग टू वांट. The Pope had also, interestingly, on the soil of India in 1999, Pope John Paul II had also said 21st century is going to be the century of harvesting Hindu souls. और जोशुआ प्रोजेक्ट, प्लांटिंग ऑफ चर्चेस, बड़ी बड़ी इनग्लोरियस, बहुत भयंकर कहानी है. अब मेरा सिर्फ इतना कहना है कि वो खुलेआम ऐलान कर रहे हैं हमारी उन्हें जेनोसाइड करनी है. वो खुलेआम ऐलान कर रहे हैं कि आप कन्वर्ट नहीं होते तो आप फासिस्ट हैं. और हमको जो कैंसिल कल्चर की बात करते हैं, यहाँ सिर्फ कैंसिल कल्चर नहीं कि आपको चुप कराएंगे, दे रिजर्व द राइट टू kill you. मार्क्सिज्म, माओइज्म यही तो बोलती है क्लास एनिमी, तो हम क्लास एनिमी हैं. तो अगर हमें खुद को बचाना है, देयर इज नो पॉइंट बीइंग गुडी गुडी. यू नो, प्लीज लिसन, वी आर रीजनेबल पीपल. आप भी सुन लो, शायद आपको फैक्ट्स पता चल जाए. ये नहीं है. दिस इज डेक्लेरेशन ऑफ वॉर. द वॉर इज ऑन गोइंग. नाउ इट्स इंटेंसिफाइंग. It is for us to decide how do we want to respond to it. In my mind, today it's clear, from a goody-goody, Gandhi-infested person, I've also outgrown that madness. And today I have no hesitation in saying कि अगर हमने खुद को बचाना है, physically, culturally, or civilizationally, we have to have a Christianity-free and Islam-free India. That's it. Thank you.